Today, we're talking about creating your coaching program. This is just a way to say, how are you going to deliver the transformation for your clients? I don't want you to confuse this and say, oh, I have to have like a package that's 5 months and only give that 5 month package or program that there's no flexibility. Really, the idea with this is what are you going to include with your coaching services to really help clients transform their lives? So yeah, we're really looking at what do clients care about, what will help them with the transformation, and also things on your end that you need to consider to put it all together. And all this stuff will affect your pricing, your consultations, and you're starting to see the interconnectedness, right? So, what do clients care about? They care about trust, treatment, and transformation. Especially in the coaching space, they need to know that you trust them, that you hear them, because otherwise they're not going to hold any weight to the advice you give or really respond well to some of the challenging questions. Take how these coaching calls go, right? Because you trust us and we trust y'all, like we feel like we can challenge you and push outside of your limits. And seeing y'all actually take those steps and do it, that's, encouraging for us to see in y'all. And so you can do that as well with your clients. And then building that trust comes from just that rapport, right? They want to feel like they know the person they're working with, right? And then treatment. Treatment is really like how they feel when they talk to you, right? Do they feel respected? Do they feel listened to? Do they feel valued? And then as a coach, that's one of the biggest things we can offer, a space for them to feel not alone in all that stuff. And just overall respect and courtesy and really professionalism too, depending on the client population you're working with. Just honestly think about how you feel when you're getting counseling or coaching from someone else. And then lastly, the transformation. And we talked about this in the past too. They don't care about the process. They don't even care about the information. They care about what they're getting out of it because that's what they're paying for, right? They're not paying for your time. They're not paying for your knowledge. They're paying for their transformation, and you're just helping them along that and helping them avoid a lot of those hurdles. So, whenever you're developing a coaching package, you need to identify the gap. And we've talked about this too in the consultation. Where do they want to go? Like, what outcome do they want? And where do they say they are now? It's very focused on their perspective of everything, and very likely that they have wrong perspectives, right? They can say, "Oh, I don't have a problem," and you see that they're in like $200,000 of consumer debt, then that's where you step in and say, "Hey, you're saying this, but this is what it's looking like." But when you help them identify that gap, where they want to go and where they are, then you have, okay, I have this gap I need to work with them to get to. Now I can make steps to get to that point. And that's where you can kind of frame your coaching process and your coaching program. And so we want to create a clear plan with our coaching program. When it comes to like communicating the value of coaching, it's hard to just say, I'm going to help you be good with your money. All right, cool. It's just like saying, I'm going to help you lose weight. And it's very vague, right? But having a clear plan with steps from where they are now to where they're going, that's how you build understanding. The simplicity of that process, steps one, two, three, and four. It's like this is a process we're going to go through. We're going to do our assessment, and then we're going to look at in that assessment, we're going to look at maybe some of your history with spending, maybe some of your relationships and things like that. And then in the next step, we're going to look at what are the actual areas in your budget that we can cut that doesn't really alter your life too much. And maybe step three is learning some of these new skills. And then step four is like reinforcing those skills. And so walking them through just like a 3 to 5 step process makes it super understandable. And then when they understand it, they actually believe they can do it. They see the stair step, the path to take, even if it's a long one, even if it's going to be a lot of work, at least they know what they're dealing with. And so that belief leads them to taking action, and then action leads to transformation. It's all driven by the client. If they are not a coachable client, it's going to be very hard to walk them through your coaching program anyways. And so to help them become more coachable, they just have to believe that they can do it, right? And they have to believe and trust you as the coach to help you along that way. And so outlining the clear plan builds that competence that you know what you're talking about and that it's not overwhelming for them to approach and they actually can take the steps. So, timeline and frequency. And we talked about this a little bit before we hit record. Um, but if they follow your plan, how long should it take them to get to their goal? So maybe it's 6 weeks, maybe it's 6 months. Think about, for the most part, for our financial coaches, we know that it takes about 3 months to get really dialed in on an accurate budget. Maybe you want to work with them for 3 months. And if they have some background in some budgeting experience, or maybe they went through FPU and they are still struggling with their budget, maybe you only meet with them once a month and do some accountability check-ins. And then for 3 months, you can reevaluate if further services are needed. Or if someone has never budgeted and they have no idea where to start, maybe you meet with them on a bi-weekly basis for 5 or 6 months. So it really depends on the need of the client, right? And especially we look at, a lot of us are focusing our practices on beginners, right? People who've never budgeted or are struggling with it. But there's also a side of financial coaching where you're looking at the wealth building side where they have budgeted and they have their processes and all this stuff, but really they need more of that belief side work, like belief work and maybe some of the emotional processing stuff that comes with being a coach, breaking through those limiting beliefs. It's very likely that you're going to work with people who are very experienced and are just needing your expertise in what you do, right? Like I know with Stella, focusing on uh, families who are growing, who are trying to grow their family, right? They may have good financial stuff, but they just need to connect the dots from good finances to having a strong family or doing that process well. And so just think about, it doesn't matter if you're working with beginners or working with experience. It's hard to conceptualize that, especially if you've never had clients. So give yourself some grace if you're able to price in some flexibility and say, hey, you know, we have as needed meetings as well so that we can navigate some of the extra stuff that may come up. You can price that into and build that into the program. So, what can you include in your coaching program? It's your program. You can structure it however you want to. If you had videos and courses and stuff like that, you can put it in, or even just like basic YouTube videos. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be like a 5 minute intro video, a 10 minute budgeting video, all just recorded on Zoom like this. Nothing fancy. Obviously, you're going to have one-to-one coaching as your package, unless you're moving to a group coaching model. And whether you want to include a community or not, you absolutely can. You don't have to use School. Of course, we use it. It helps us organize some of our content better. And it also will help us in the future for any other coaches or any other clients that come into the communities. But Facebook groups are perfect, just like a closed Facebook group, something like that, just so they have that support. Just think about, what does a client need? Just the bare minimum, what they need to overcome their next step. Because as you add in more stuff, it gets overwhelming. So just give them enough, just enough to give them everything. It's like, it seems counterintuitive, but they don't need information about investing right now while they're trying to pay off debt, right? They don't need information about house buying if they don't even have an emergency fund. So really want to focus on where the client is at now, what do they need for the next 1 to 2 steps, and then we'll add all that other stuff later. Just provide context and say, hey, we'll get to that. But this is part of getting into that psyche of a client. They don't want to be overwhelmed. They just want a simple solution. And if you can just help them hold their hand through that process, that's what they care about. So you may not even have to have courses or community or anything else other than coaching. But just think about where your client is at and what they would benefit and really what they would use. If they're busy, if they're full-time parents and full-time working, maybe they don't have time to meet twice a week and on community calls and participate and watch courses, right? So really, really get into that mental framework of, what does their day-to-day look like? What is their week to week? And then building what is most applicable to them. And then you can have the other additional resources as like, if you're interested, check it out here. But really just focus on budget or just focus on understanding this spending framework, whatever it is. So we're just putting it all together. Like this coaching package, the offer are pretty much go hand in hand. And then from that, you're building the pricing. And then with those three parts, now you have that consultation, you know, work of how do I communicate this? And then eventually, I'm going to eventually talk about where to find clients in that lead generation stuff. We did it this way because if we started off with finding clients, you can have 10 prospects, but if you don't even know what you're offering, it's not going to be effective, right? You may end up losing 9 of them, and the one person is kind of like iffy, anyways. And so, really dialing in what you're offering, how you're offering it, the price, and then how you're communicating that value, then you can more effectively find who you want to serve, how you want to serve them, and then ultimately that leads to better transformations for the clients. Do you have anything you wanted to add to any of that stuff?
We have a situation, and I've been working on a financial makeover segment for my platform. And my pitch was that I was going to do live financial coaching with a willing participant as a lead magnet for future clients. It's kind of like trial by fire, and I'm a little nervous because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing just yet, but I'm technically going to be providing financial counseling but in a public format. So I'm kind of setting myself for potential disaster, but I've been brainstorming it. I've talked to people about it. They like the idea, so I'm going to run with it. And I'm just trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this? So, any advice?
Yeah, I'd actually thought about doing that. I was not quite as bold to try it just because like I was like, oh my goodness, it's a lot of pressure. But no, I think the idea is brilliant, right? Do you watch Caleb Hammer?
I've heard the name, but yeah, I haven't seen much.
Essentially, what he
Yes, just
does.
watch it. It's so much fun.
So it's kind of
Like
what
some of the
Joey's
people
talk.
are
Yeah.
so like, ugh, get on your nerves, but it's really good.
So it's similar to what Joey's looking at. He does what's called a financial audit. So essentially takes all the bank statements, all the debt accounts, and goes through it live, not live, but recorded for YouTube. And he's blown up because you're like peeking into everyone's lives on all things situations, so they're not feeling alone because there's another client on the other screen doing it. And then also the financial advice. I think taking it from a coaching perspective would look a little differently, right? I think as long as you're approaching those calls with the perspective of service and that it's not a consultation, trying to sell them at the end of it, really just provide free value. Just pretend they already signed in as a client. This is your first session with them, and then everyone getting a peek into that. Hopefully, you're providing their like values, that you're challenging their limiting beliefs because chances are the person that's watching it also has the same beliefs while also giving them some sound financial advice too in your scope, right? We're not, unless you are licensed as a financial advisor or as a CPA or even as a mental health, counselor or clinical social worker, you want to make sure you don't overstep in those areas, especially when it comes to mental health. As long as you're clear on the call that this is coaching, it also gets you into less sticky situations. If you're
Right.
saying, I am a licensed social worker, providing financial coaching stuff. Um, as long as you're clear that you are not functioning as the licensed social worker, you're functioning as the financial coach.
Right.
Um, but yeah, especially if you have your clinical license and you are licensed in Tennessee, for example, and it can be taken as, oh, I'm seeking counseling from Joey, then it may cause an issue. Right.
That's why I wanted to highlight the financial social work like as a core element of
Mhm.
my coaching. It is kind of uncharted territory in some
Yeah.
regards. So part of me is just like I could be have egg on my face if I, misspeak, or I mean it's so public, but at the same time I'm like trying to be an ambassador for financial social work and an advocate for it, and just provide a more holistic model to personal financial coaching. Intention was just being a lead magnet. So that my intention with this whole project is to essentially get eyeballs on me and my services. So I still haven't made any money yet, but I'm hoping that, by doing this, it could at least generate somebody to be like, oh, yeah, I don't want to do this publicly, maybe, but I would like to maybe hire him individually. So that's kind of my intention, my hope. So,
Yeah, and it's a really great way not only to hone your skills, like you're getting practice while providing value, and you're absolutely going to make mistakes, right? You may say something wrong, but that's okay. You're learning, and especially like it's public, right? But it's not like 10,000 people are watching. It's
right.
got a small audience, and usually they're pretty forgiving. So you have some leeway there, and at least with like recordings and stuff like that, just delete it if it was a really bad one or
Mhm.
crop it up or something. Because there have been plenty of situations on the live calls with on the Ramsey show, right? The funny one that always gets brought up is George made a comment about a horse and about selling the horse, and he just angered the equine community.
That's true.
You can't just sell a horse.
Right.
But may say something wrong, just approaching those with humility and focus on the client and not so much that you're anywhere like smarter than them or better than them. All that stuff is sensed over the camera, even if people don't realize it. The nonverbals, how you speak, the questions you ask. If you're approaching it with humility and really that attitude of service, you should be all good. And I'm excited to see how that pans out for you because this is a really good idea to do that.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to. I've been challenging you,
Yeah,
Jeff,
Sam's
with
out here just
confidence.
challenging everyone.
I like it.
But you said, even though I really don't know what I'm doing, or
Mm.
something along those lines.
Hmm.
And I just want to challenge you that, like, you do know what you're doing. You wouldn't be offering this, right, if you didn't know what you were doing.
Fair enough.
Um,
Yeah.
but, like, also to have the confidence that you know what you're doing,
Mm.
like, even if it's false confidence, because people, especially if it's live and it's recorded or whatever, will pick up that you are not confident in what you're doing.
Mm.
And that also could negatively, it could bring a negative impact to what you're trying to do,
Mm.
right? So I think it's important to, like, create confidence, right? Like, to have actual confidence or create false confidence,
Right.
so that people are like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about.
Mhm.
And isn't like, oh, he seems kind of unsure. I don't know if I
Mm.
trust him with my
Right.
finances, you know?
Yeah.
Especially because finances is such a touchy subject,
Mm.
and it's very, I don't know, it's personal finances, it's
Yeah.
very personal, and so there's a lot of humility in it.
Mm.
um so having the confidence to say, I really know what I'm doing and I really can help you, not being like, well, I kind of know what I'm doing,
Mm.
so maybe I could help you.
Right.
There's a big difference. It sounds a little different, but there is a big difference between those two things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to kind of like build off of that, they will also know when you don't know what you're talking about. Just focus on if there actually is something you haven't worked with, just be upfront and say, I don't have personal experience with it from what I've
Right.
read, what I've seen. Here's some options. I know people get in the biggest trouble when they start trying to like give advice on things they have not done. And
Mm.
then that shows. And it also starts to feel like you're talking at them. But when you really approach every coaching conversation from a point of curiosity and questions,
Mhm.
even if you know the information, like that just shows you're helping them walk through the process for themselves. I mean, there's a lot of situations where you won't have the answer. And the better thing, instead of saying, like here's what I saw on YouTube, or here is what my accountant friend told me. Just ask them the questions. Say like,
I have a client right now who is ex NFL, and so they have, like, their retirement accounts are not 401ks and IRAs. They're like some weird NFL stuff. So I flat out said to them, I have no clue what those accounts are, but I will do my research. It's not something I've ever dealt with before. It's not something I have knowledge in. So I told them that. I was like, I've never heard of this before, obviously. And I will do my research and get back to you. And kind of any kind of stuff you have on it that you can send to me that I can read through so that you guys don't have to do the work. I'll do the work, but, like, I'm just gonna, it's hard to find information on that kind of stuff on the internet. So
Mm.
whatever you have, just send it to me so I can kind of review it and see what I'm working with. I think it's important to recognize that it's okay not to know everything and to not have an answer for every single situation that comes up in an instant. It's okay to say, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out for you.
And that builds that trust that they care about, right? Because they know we're human, and if we act like we're not, and it's like, I don't know about this one. They're gonna ask you, what should I do? Like, should I do A or B? And that's a really sticky situation to be in. You approach that situation a lot because you're treated as the expert, but it's really important to ask them to weigh the options for themselves. You coach them on how to think through that process. You don't have to think through it for them because you may have an idea and say, yeah, you should sell your car and do this. When you do that, you're giving them the answer, which is great. But what if there's other things that we don't even know about, right? And if they make that decision and something happens on the back end, that they can put that on you, right? Or if they say, hey, I don't know which job to take, which one should I choose? Instead of weighing it for them, say, okay, what do you see are the benefits of this job? More income, better benefits, whatever, or better work-life balance. Like, let them identify that stuff. As coaches, our role isn't like advice necessarily, it's helping them discover the advice within themselves, because a lot of times they kind of know, they just don't know where to find it, like, inside.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna say like that client and that client in particular, excuse me, like they were like, should we sell our house? And we talked through it, and they came to the decision at the end of our conversation that yeah, they needed to sell their house, and that's huge. Like I'm never gonna tell anybody to sell their house, but like they needed to sell their house, you know. And so they did. Like they made that decision for themselves. They sold it. Now they're in an apartment. And like that was something that really showed me that they're committed to this because they were like, yeah, we have to sell our house. We have to start completely over because that's how dire our situation is. And it's kind of that same sell the horse. It's like our situation is so dire that we have to make some decisions that we would never have even like fathomed maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now we're like, okay, this is actually the smartest decision for our family, and so we're gonna go ahead and make that decision. But again, I didn't make the decision for them. I just walked through their entire situation with them, and they were like, yeah, we really need to sell our house. And I was like, yeah, you kind of do. So kind of reinforcing their decision because I knew it was the smartest choice, but not making that decision for them.
Yeah, it all goes back to that self-determinism. I know in the social workspace, it's always like, all right, where does the client want to go? What their decisions are, empowering them to make their own decisions. Same thing with coaching, right? Because that's part of the value, that they can walk away with more confidence in their own decision making, and you help them do that. Yeah, and I hope it's an encouragement too that your programs are going to change. Absolutely. Like what I started with, one was super disorganized, very low value to the clients. And then as you're gaining experience, as you're making the mistakes, um, as you're getting haters too, like that'll help really reinforce the areas that should be reinforced and maybe weed out some of the areas that aren't really important to keep. Um, and then just, yeah, having that flexibility that it's not going to be perfect the first go around, and that's okay. If you have a product that's like if you submitted it for a class and got a 70%, you're better off submitting 10 projects and getting 70s on all of them instead of two projects and getting 100. At least, especially in the beginning. As you're more experienced, you want to put more effort into like really perfecting it. But right now, when you yourself are gaining the experience, you know, that's like one of the biggest things that stuck with me. Like I sent Joey some of my first YouTube videos. I'm like, this is so cringy. I took it off YouTube. I think I sent it to Sam too. Because they were horrible. Poor editing, poor lighting, poor audio, horrible scripting. But I'm like, the content's out there, the experience is out there. And so with these coaching packages, it's not going to be perfect. I've like that's why if you can plan in some flexibility, that'd be great. Like the one client that I'm working with right now, who's an attorney, you know, our session started to pivot towards the job change and some of like the mental hurdle she's facing, but then some of the budgeting stuff kind of took on the sideline. But luckily, have enough margin in the coaching program to say, okay, for this last month, instead of meeting bi-weekly, we're going to meet weekly to make sure you get all the value you can out of this coaching program, and then see where to go from there. And that's part of, you know, all that will factor into that pricing, that offer delivery and stuff. So yeah, give yourself some flexibility, and um, don't be too hard on yourself, right?
I think Teddy, you gave me some good advice on a comment on one of my first videos. You said start messy, and I've definitely internalized that. Like I'm gonna start. I'm not because I don't want to be a perfectionist. I just want to go out there and start and get the ball rolling. And I think that was really useful advice, honestly.
I think I was like your very first live or something like that. I was
Yeah.
watching. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that sounds exactly like where I started. It was not edited. All the spaces, the ums, the ahs, all that stuff were in there, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a learning process. And 3 months from now, you just keep staying consistent, or like Stella, you keep staying consistent with your posts. You're going to start refining them so that it speaks better to the clients, right? You may see, oh, these types of posts get better interactions and these ones don't, and then you start pivoting that way. Same thing with videos, or same thing with just conversations. Like, oh, I'm having a DM conversation, and usually at this point, when I don't shift the conversation or I'm asking too many questions, they just kind of stop responding. And so getting the reps in and doing it messy, you're going to lose some potential clients, but that's just part of learning, right? If you have any questions, that's what the community is for. That's what our group chat's for. Until then, y'all have a good rest of your Saturday.